$160,000. That is the starting salary premium Google pays for a specific type of employee. They aren't looking for the best coder in the room. They aren't looking for the person with the deepest PhD. They are looking for the person who can connect two things that shouldn't go together. This is the single most profitable skill in the modern economy. And the crazy part? You probably already have it. You've just been trained to hide it. You spent your whole life being told to pick a lane, to niche down, to stop being a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. And honestly, it made sense at the time. You felt scattered while your friends were becoming specialists. You felt like you were falling behind because you couldn't stick to one thing. But that feeling of being scattered wasn't a flaw. It was a signal. Because while the specialists were digging deeper into their silos, the world changed underneath them. The rules of the game have flipped. And the flaw you've been trying to fix is actually your unfair advantage. Here is the reality of the job market right now. Specialization is for insects. That's not an insult, that's biology. In a stable environment, the specialist wins because they are efficient. But we are not in a stable environment. We are in the most volatile technological shift in human history. And in a volatile environment, the specialist is the first to go extinct. Think about it. If your entire value is based on being the best at one specific software, what happens when an update changes the interface? You go from expert to novice overnight. But the person who understands the principles behind the software, the person who understands design and psychology and business logic, they don't just survive the update, they exploit it. This brings us to what researchers call the range advantage. Google discovered this by accident. They spent years hiring the top computer science graduates from the top universities. They assumed the best employees would be the ones with the highest technical scores. They were wrong. When they analyzed the data of their most successful, highest-paid leaders, technical skill came in last. Dead last. The top characteristics were things like connecting disparate ideas, understanding other disciplines, seeing the big picture. These are not soft skills. These are survival skills. And the reason they are worth $160,000 more is simple supply and demand. The world is churning out millions of specialists. AI is generating billions of specialist outputs every second. But the supply of people who can synthesize that information, that supply is almost zero. This is where the math gets absolutely wild. Most people think career growth is linear. You learn more about X, you earn more from X. But value doesn't live in the depth of X anymore. Value lives in the gap between X and Y. If you are in the top 25% of coders, you make a good living. If you are in the top 25% of public speakers, you make a good living. But if you are in the top 25% of coders who can also public speak, you don't just add those salaries together, you multiply them. You become a unicorn. This is called the synthesis gap. It is the exponential value created when you combine two average skills to create a rare intersection. You don't have to be the best in the world at anything. You just have to be the only person in the room who can speak two different languages. The engineer who understands sales, the designer who understands finance, the writer who understands data. That intersection is where the money is. But knowing this isn't enough. You need a system to apply it. Most people try to become generalists by just reading random Wikipedia pages. That's not synthesis, that's just trivia. The high earners use a specific framework I call the transfer learning protocol. It works like this. You take a concept from one domain and force it onto another. You look at how biology solves a problem, and you ask how that applies to marketing. You look at how architects design buildings, and you ask how that applies to writing code. This feels awkward at first. Your brain wants to keep things in neat little boxes. But every time you force a connection, you are literally rewiring your neural pathways to see patterns that specialists are blind to. This is why the Google employees who had scattered backgrounds outperformed the straight-A students. They weren't just retrieving information, they were translating it. Now, you might be thinking this sounds exhausting. Learning multiple fields seems harder than just mastering one. But here is the counterintuitive truth. Specialization is actually the path of highest resistance. When you compete as a specialist, you are competing against the entire world on a single metric. You have to be better than everyone else at that one thing. That is a miserable, grinding race to the bottom. But when you stack skills, when you combine your weird hobby with your day job, you create a monopoly of one. Competition disappears because nobody else has your specific combination. You aren't competing to be the best. You are the only one. This is what creates true career leverage. Leverage isn't about working harder. It's about your output being unique enough that it cannot be replaced. But here's the part nobody talks about. This isn't just about making more money. It is about safety. We are entering the age of infinite intelligence. AI is essentially the ultimate specialist. It can diagnose a disease better than a doctor. It can write code faster than a developer. If your strategy is to be the best at a single task, you are fighting a losing war against a machine that doesn't sleep. But AI is terrible at context. It is terrible at knowing which problem to solve. It is terrible at understanding why something matters. That is the domain of the generalist. The generalist doesn't compete with AI. The generalist orchestrates AI. While the specialist is terrified of being replaced by the tool, the generalist is busy using the tool to do the work of 10 specialists. Your scattered brain is the only thing that keeps you relevant. So how do you actually execute this? You stop apologizing for your curiosity. You stop trying to hide the fact that you were a musician before you were a lawyer. You stop deleting the irrelevant experience from your resume. You lean into the intersections. Start looking for the problems at your job that fall between departments. The problems the marketing team can't solve because they don't understand product. The problems the product team can't solve because they don't understand customers. Step into that gap. That gap is scary because it has no owner. But because it has no owner, it has no ceiling. That is where you build your $160,000 advantage. You have been sold a lie about focus. They told you that depth was the only path to value. They were wrong. Depth is easily automated. Breadth is where humanity hides. Your ability to roam, to explore, to pull from different worlds, that is not a bug in your operating system. It is the feature. The future doesn't belong to the people who can do one thing perfectly. It belongs to the people who can do many things imperfectly and weave them into something new. You are already that person. Now go get paid for it. If you want to stay ahead of the curve while everyone else catches up, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And I want to hear from you. What are the 2 weird skills you have that shouldn't go together? Share them in the comments below.